Hi, my name's Catherine from Crime Psych, and in this video I'm going to give you a short introduction to the psychology of murder. Murder is defined in the Oxford Dictionary as the intentional taking of one person's life by a single perpetrator. And when we're examining the psychology of murder, it's important to understand the behaviours that we should be looking at that are important, because murder in itself is a legal term. It's not the act itself, because there are different situations where you could take a life and it wouldn't be considered murder. So for example, if a soldier was at war and he killed one of the enemy, not only would that act go unchallenged and unpunished, it would probably be rewarded by some type of medal when he got home. And in a similar way with things like euthanasia, in some countries euthanasia is legal. In this country it's still against the law, but in some countries you can end another person's life early and that would not be considered murder. So it's important to examine and explore the various behaviours that are carried out by the offender when they're committing these crimes, while they're carrying out the act of murder. It's also important to explore the various relationships between the offender and the victim. The most common type of murder is a single murder, where there's one offender and one victim, and they usually know each other. They are known to each other in some way, and that's the most common type of murder that we have in this country. However, there's a range of different types of murder that can occur. Sometimes we come across people who kill multiple victims, and how they're defined depends on the timing of these killings. A serial killer is defined as having two or more victims, but there must be, the victims are killed in separate times and separate locations, but most importantly there's a cooling off period in between the killings. So there's normally a period of at least 24 hours in between each of the murders for it to be classed as a serial killing. If there isn't that 24-hour period, if a person kills two or more people at different times at different locations, but it's all within the same 24 hours, then that's classed as a spree killing. But we can also have things like mass killings, where there are multiple victims in one space and killed at one time, and that's the type of thing that most terrorists will attempt to do. Murder a lot of people in one single time at one location. And as we begin to build up an idea of the various types of things that are important to look at, such as what type of murder is it? Does the offender know the victim in some way? If the offender doesn't know the victim, does the offender know the location? There will normally be some form of relationship which ties the offender, the victim and the location together. It leads us to highlight the fact that there is no simple explanation, there is no simple psychological explanation for murder. So what we do as criminal psychologists is we draw on other areas of psychology, of established behaviours, proven ways of behaving, and apply that to crime, and in this case to murder. So the theory of aggression was formulated some years ago, and the theory of aggression suggests that an act of aggression can be defined as instrumental or expressive. And an instrumental act of aggression is normally used as the aggression is used as a tool to get something from the victim, to gain something from that victim, whereas expressive aggression is defined as the act of aggression itself being the most important part. So that's normally quite an emotive type of aggression, where the reward would be the behaviour, would be the aggression itself. And so then we can take that and we can apply that to murder. And so then investigative psychologists have suggested that instrumental murder can come under two broad psychological contexts. And the first psychological context is that the murder occurs as a result of wanting to silence the victim. So it could be as part of a sexual attack or some rape or some other type of crime, and the offender kills the victim so that they can't be identified afterwards. And the second form of instrumental murder would be to gain some type of goods, to make some either monetary gain or gain some type of goods from that murder so that they can take something with them. Whereas expressive murder is again an emotive experience. It's born from emotion, and so the act of the murder is the important part. The act of taking somebody's life would be seen as the gain within an expressive murder. Instrumental murders can often be pre-planned. If an offender is going to get some goods or some money from another person, they usually take equipment or weapons with them in preparation for that. Whereas expressive acts of murder normally occur impulsively. They're born out of interpersonal relationships, perhaps an argument or some sort of domestic violence event or some form of retribution. One question which I'm often asked about murderers is why? Simply why? Why do people do this? Well, one psychological explanation would be, well, what is the gain that can be made from that? Is the offender trying to get some money or some goods or to hide some evidence from the victim or within the victim? Or was it an explosion of emotion? Was it an emotive interaction between the offender and the victim themselves? Most murderers will see their actions as justified. And one particular study has suggested that these various justifications for murder will come under 4 distinct categories. The first category of these is defence. And so when the justification is defence, the offender feels that there was a threat to them, either to their own life or some sort of physical harm or threat to them. That type of murder is often carried out impulsively, perhaps in prison where there's no immediate weapons on hand, and so whatever is on hand is used as a weapon. The second type of justification is retribution, and this is where the offender feels justified in their act because of previous wrongs which the victim has inflicted, either directly or indirectly, onto the offender. And so that they will have had prior contact with the victim, and this is normally a planned event, so weapons would be taken to that kind of murder to plan for that. The third type of justification is where it's unintended, where the murder has occurred as some sort of interaction, which is normally at a bar or a social event or, you know, at somebody's house. And that normally occurs because the victim has undermined the offender in some way, and the offender takes action against feeling that offence, and sometimes that spills over into murder. And the final one is disrespect. And in this type of justification, the offender will feel disrespected by the victim in some way. And so this type of murder is again usually planned. The disrespect is often a prior contact, and so it's more normal for that type of justification to have a planned murder taken to them. So it's important to understand that although there are many justifications that murderers will use, they can be grouped into various categories as justifications, and that's certainly true for the offenders that I've interviewed in the past, have suggested that they didn't mean to do it at the time, that they just pushed a person backwards. This might be, you know, a younger person, or it might be somebody of the same age who they've got in an argument or a fight with. They've given them a shove or a punch, or punched them in the head, and they fell over. They may very well have sustained a head injury and they've died as a result. And that's unintended because they didn't set out to murder that person, but by doing that aggressive act, by pushing them or punching them in some way, it then becomes classified as murder. And I've spoken to other offenders who've described situations in which one drug dealer has taken money from the offender and refused to pay him back, or took drugs and refused to pay him for that, or took some other equipment and refused to give it back. And so there's some type of retribution which the offender intended to gain from by killing the victim. And so, although it's not possible for me in this very short video to give an in-depth overview of the psychology of murder, in order to do that I would need to spend a long time going over the groundwork and all of the different frameworks which we use. But you can see from the different classifications of murder, such as the single murder, the spree killing, the serial killing, the mass murder, the various reasons why people might act. You know, is it emotional? Is it to get something? And the various justifications which can come into that. Us human beings are really complex beings, and so our behaviour can very often depend on context, and it can depend on the social interactions that happen or occur as part of an offence. And so it's important to understand what we need to look at and what we need to ignore, the types of behaviours within a murder. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you've at least learned something from it. If you want to leave me any questions, you can leave a comment below. I'll try and get back to everybody. If you like this type of video, I will be doing more psychological explanations of crime, various different crimes, and psychological analyses of some serial offenders. So you can subscribe to the channel if you like that type of video. You can even go over to our website and be added to the mailing list, so that you will be notified of any blogs or vlogs which are coming out, or any newsletters. So thank you for taking the time to watch this today. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching the video, and I do look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thanks for watching.